abstract. But the debate that got me thinking about this was this idea of, can we have objective goodness without God? And it's often taken for granted that with God you can have objective goodness. I've critiqued that position in the past anyway, but there is a more trivial critique.
Okay, I shouldn't interject here, but my understanding of God is that goodness is the same thing as God. So the idea of the ultimate good is the same thing as the idea of God. Did I say that right? Ultimate good is ultimate God. It's just conceptually exactly the same. The more you try to unravel what an ultimate good would be, the more you discover you're running into the same definition of God. So if there is such thing as good and it's on a scale and there's an ultimate version and an infinite maxing out of that, then that is God, the idea of God. So it's a weird question to say, because if you said it my way, it'd be very weird, because you'd be saying, does an ultimate good rely on an ultimate good existing? Yes, because they're the same thing. Yeah.
You can level at something like divine command theory, which is the idea that what is moral is determined by God's will, which is to say that that doesn't establish objective moral truths. It establishes subjective moral truths. They're just subjective to the will of God. And I think one of the reasons why this response basically seems trivial is because if something is true in God's will, and God is the creator and governor of the universe, then in effect you have a stable notion of truth. It doesn't vary between individuals, because while it's relative to God's will is sort of intuitively the most important will, and at the very least it's not like we have different morals between different people. You get a kind of quasi-objectivity of morality, even if you don't get at true objective morality as...
Yes, narratively, yes. But if goodness and truth, which is what I think, are the same concept of God, because truth is what is, and truth is reality, and nothing can be true besides what's true, because that's what's true. Right? So truth itself is the existence of everything, and that's very definitionally like what God is, which is the highest good thing. Then it's not subjective to God's will, because it's like saying truth is subjective to what's true. It's like, yes. Yes, it is relative to what's true. It is dictated by truth. Again, depending on your definitions of these words, which I obviously have some differences of definition to Joseph here, these seem like not good questions.
You would in something like, I don't know, Platonic theories of moral realism, where what is moral is determined apart from any mind, including apart from the mind of God. And this got me thinking that I think the same thing holds for lots of other debates that are, in popular discourse at least, framed around subjectivity and objectivity. We tend to equate subjectivity with loads and loads of variance between individual people, and objectivity with invariance between people. And that does hold for objectivity. If something is objective, that is, it's not dependent on the existence of any mind or...
I really find it interesting, subjective truths. Like actual... Because if you believe in objective truth, you also believe, usually, in subjective truth. Subjective truth is so fascinating to me, because I love both where people are different and where people are the same. I think both of those things are super fascinating, because when you find something where everyone's the same, it helps you to build like big maps so you can understand, everyone's going to react this way, everyone's going to do this. And that's super helpful for like building structure in life. But then also, if you start discovering spots in human nature where everyone's different, that's super interesting. Why is that interesting? Because it can also help you build a map in understanding the world, where you know that yes, everyone does this thing, but when it comes to this, everyone is different. And then the question is like, how does that occur? How do those differences become so wildly arrayed and so vastly different between one another? And those differences can also challenge the overall narrative, the overall worldview that you have. And I think some of the most interesting things and frustrating things is where things are not uniform, because it just allows for things to shake up what you think you know. But sometimes it's easy to explain.
Any collection of minds, then yes, it won't vary between people because it doesn't really have any relation to those people. At least not a kind of metaphysical grounding relation. It exists independently. But the converse doesn't necessarily hold of subjectivity. Something can be mind dependent and yet still not vary all that much between individuals. I think that a really good example of this is something like pain. So there are lots of discussions online and in popular discourse and in philosophy journals about whether we have objective concepts of beauty or aesthetics or something like that. And I think that's partly because beauty and interpretations of beauty do tend to vary a little bit between people. This doesn't happen with something like pain. And I suspect that this is because, for all intents and purposes, our experience of pain is practically convergent. And by this, I mean that, except for a few exceptional cases, we broadly seem to perceive and act pain in roughly similar ways. One exception to this might be something like a monk self-immolating, right? When a monk pours gasoline over themselves and lights himself on fire and then seemingly just sits there until they die. That is one of the few times where we can ask questions like, oh, is that monk really in pain? I think that kind of alerts us to the fact that pain definitely is subjective, because if there were no minds, there would also be no pain. Well, it could be variant between people, but practically it's invariant. If it is variant, it very rarely comes up, and variation in things like perceived beauty come up significantly more often. So I suppose one way that you could really steelman the idea that all truth is subjective would be to say,
oh my goodness. So many thoughts I'm having. Is this a flurry? Because like, what can any experience that you have in a moment be experienced by someone else? Like it can't even be experienced by you again in the same way. You have similar experiences, but I don't even get that. Yes, if the question is, does pain exist as an objective truth? What? Yes. Yes, pain exists in the world as an objective experience. Yes, because you're basing the fact on the fact that is someone experiencing that thing. Yes, that's there. So an objective truth of a subjective experience. And so did that person subjectively experience something that the person next to them was not experiencing? Yes. How to understand, I'm a bit lost what he's saying exactly. I have one. So I do a lot of these like little tests where I'll ask a question to many people and I'll see what the answers are. And some of the questions have remarkably like similar answers, and then sometimes people vary from the answer that everyone else is giving, and then there'll be this new answer that pops up. And if I ask it enough times, a third answer will pop up, but then it might only range between those three examples. So there's a question I always ask, and it's so I tell a story. I start to tell a story. I build a scene for you, and I say, the wolf stands on his rock. What happens next? And then in that moment, you can answer, you can comment what you think, and tell me. And whatever your answer was, and it's very important that you pick the answer that appeared to you. There are a couple answers that everyone gives. And then I even learned that depending on what time of day or night it was, in their mind, changes the outcome of what the wolf does next. So if it's nighttime, he howls at the moon, or he just howls, and there's no moon in their picture, but it's the same action. The other one is he jumps off his rock, and that's daytime. And when they do that, I ask them, what do they do next after they jump off the rock? Because I was just curious. And all of them say he goes to hunt. And some people just say he goes to hunt instead of he jumps off the rock. So there are like a couple variations, but when people imagine, it happens automatically into like this skew, this funnel. The other thing is that you didn't tell your imagination what to do. Your imagination just presented you with an image, which is such an interesting phenomena. And some people can't even see that. So, there are different minds, and some people can't see their images in their mind. So if you tell someone to picture an apple, they're like, oh, I can't picture an apple. However, I believe it's still happening somewhere in like a very smoky, unconscious part of their brain that they don't have like conscious access to, but it's definitely occurring, and they're definitely picking up on it. So that's what I think. And then other people can see images that pop up into their head, but most people don't notice it's happening while it's happening. Otherwise, it would spook us out a bit more. It's a bit weird. I think it is such a new part of our brain that it is able to create visualizations and imagine, and not just imagine in our brain, but imagine in the real world and put 3D objects in the world with our holographic projection mechanisms in our mind. Because it's so new, it's less real compared to like this mic that's in front of me. I don't have the same ability to create an image as the thing in front of me. And then also, it's hard to even recognize that it's in front of me, which is like, so you're talking, someone's talking, images are popping up in your mind of correlating ideas, correlating images, correlating sounds. Stimulation is going in, and some feedback is happening in your mind. But that feedback, it takes a back seat in our mind, so we don't even see. And as I'm telling you, that's so amazing that it's happening, that you're seeing things and you're never even noticing it. It's like in the real world, if something moves like beside you, your head turns because you need to react, because you've got a system in you that needs to react to that fact. But you have a lot of very important things that are going on in your mind that you're not even noticing. And if you noticed, if you took more care in paying it attention, you might get a lot of in the moment wisdom that you're missing out on. And so what ends up happening with that information is it gets translated into your, absorbed by your subconscious and by your feelings. And it sets off little vibes and energies and lets you know how to act. But it's a much more distilled version of the original thought. If you were to see it consciously and be able to evaluate those thoughts, whole different thing. Anyways, we're still reacting.
Something like this. Truth is a linguistically defined concept, and in as much as it is linguistically defined, you could not have truth without the existence of people or consciousness. You would have reality, sure, but there would be no truth.
Those two words are exactly synonymous. You can replace the word reality, and watch, you'll start talking about it. You can replace the word reality with truth every single time. It means the same thing. You can replace the word truth with reality every single time. The annoying thing is, language is so interesting because different words. I remember learning this in like a very shit TAFE course, but they said something really interesting in like a English class or whatever. Every word has different energy. It can mean the exact same thing, but the images that are associated with those words are vastly different. So if you say thin or skinny, or fat or chubby, they have like different energy. Say hungry or starving, right? Yeah, all the words that you can use, that you can choose to use, carry with it a mental picture or like an energetic picture of what that word means. And reality happens to fill out this like the sky. I know this for me, so I haven't actually asked people, but I know what it means for me is more cosmos, more cosmic energy, like reality, right? It's this big thing that holds the universe together. In the exact same way, that is truth. Truth is that big thing holding everything together. It is what is. It is what is real. It is true. The true things that exist, right? Reality and truth are exactly the same. But truth, when you use the word truth, you mean it. You use it in different contexts of sentences. But you can have synonymous sentences, and I say this all the time. If I said the words, the truth of the matter is, that would be the same as the fact of the matter is, right? The fact and truth. But then if I said the reality of the matter is, still works. And even the word matter and situation, because you say the reality of the situation is. Same sentence.
True statements, because there wouldn't be any statements at all. There would be no true propositions because there wouldn't be propositions, at least.
So what Joe is saying is that truth is propositional. It's a language. It's only in language that you can say that there's truth. There would be no propositions, but the propositions, it's like math. Math is not, so there's the linguistic term, mathematics, and there's what it's describing. I had a conversation about this with someone recently. Math is created by humans, right? 1 and plus and 1 and equals and 2. Each one of those systems. One sec. But what mathematics equations are trying to describe are concepts in the real world. So mathematics exists outside of any human being's existence. It is discovered by humans, not created by humans. So same way, truth is not invented by humans. It's discovered.
Not how we traditionally conceive of them. If that's true, then true. If that's true, then you do end up with a situation where truth is subjective. However, in this model of the universe, you could also say that because reality definitely exists as its own thing, if you do have minds, they're going to converge on the same concept of truth, because we need to figure out what reality actually looks like in order to interact with it and succeed in our goals.
Okay, so I said that we could change the word truth with reality.
Of minds, they're going to converge on the same
let's go back.
Be propositions, at least not how we traditionally conceive of them. If that's true, then
and in that sense, when you say true, you would say if that's real, right? Because real is true, right? And what's real is what is, which is what is being. So if reality is being, it's all like describing the same idea.
True. If that's true, then you do end up with a situation where truth is subjective. However, in this model of the universe, you could also say that because reality definitely exists as its...
So because reality is real, because reality exists, because truth exists, because truth is true,
its own thing. If you do have minds, they're going to converge on the same concept of truth, because...
Yeah, you can just swap these words. They're the same thing. Because if something is real, that means that it's true, right?
We need to figure out what reality actually looks like in order to interact with it and succeed in our goals. This would be a kind of very loose modern pragmatist story.
I wonder how